Disabilities Issues and Updates on BCTV is supported by the Berks County Center for Independent Living, Abilities in Motion.
North 5th Street in Reading, Pennsylvania. The telephone number you can reach us is 610-376-0010. This is a special edition because Abilities in Motion presents ADA Celebration and Art Show. The information about the art show is going to come a little later in our show, but we need to give you some history about ADA. So Shelley, welcome to our show.
Thanks.
Let's give our viewers some history about the ADA, and then we're going to let them know about the exciting art show that is going to be held on July the 26th. Let's talk about the ADA. What is the ADA, Americans Disabilities Act?
It's actually one of America's most comprehensive civil rights pieces that was written and modeled after the Civil Rights Act of 1964. It's an equal opportunity for people with disabilities, and it's a piece of legislation that prohibits discrimination and guarantees people with disabilities the same opportunities and rights of non-disabled individuals to own land, to be employed, to have goods and services shipped to them just like anybody else, basically to live the same kinds of lives that able-bodied people can.
Wonderful. What is the definition of disability under the law, which is very important?
It is, and it's a very broad one at that. It's basically anybody that defines themselves to have a physical or mental impairment that limits one or more major activities in their life. And that could be anything from walking, feeding themselves, transferring, holding a job, any of those things. It's a person who has a history record of an impairment, or a person who's perceived to have such an impairment. But the ADA doesn't specifically identify, because it is so broad, it doesn't identify a list in general.
For all those trivia persons that are out there, when did the ADA become a law?
It was July 26th of 1990, and then it was revised in July of 2010. And we are so excited about the art show because we're having it on July 26th this year. So it's on the anniversary of the ADA.
Well, wonderful, wonderful. Are all people who have disabilities covered under the ADA?
Well, yeah, it's a very broad definition. If they're covered, it depends what the law is actually looking into. Under Title I, if they're seeking employment, then they are covered. But not necessarily. If they aren't seeking employment or currently working in a particular title, some of the law wouldn't apply to them, but other aspects of the law would. So it kind of depends.
So what kinds of things are covered under the Americans Disability Act? What type of things?
Well, there's actually 5 titles to the ADA.
5 titles, okay.
Right. So we'll go over one by one. So the first one is employment.
Okay.
And that is really very important. It's to help design people with disabilities to not only obtain employment, which is so important. Most people with disabilities are underemployed and undervalued. But it's designed to help people with disabilities access employment, maintain employment, and employers must provide reasonable accommodations.
Okay.
Whether it's a slightly specialized office chair, or ramps, or an office space or a cubicle close to an exit, an emergency exit if they are blind or low vision. So simple modifications that can be adapted for them.
Okay, for employment.
So, yeah. The second one is the state and the local government.
Okay.
So they must have the right to vote and to be able to register to vote. They may have access to a voting poll. That's their right. Also public transportation and being able to get into government offices. They have to have a ramp. It can be on the side of the building, but they still have to have the ability to access the same government and local and state offices that any non-disabled individual has.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, so we said employment, we said state, what's next? Public accommodations?
Public accommodations, yeah. So this goes under, it prohibits public or privately owned places like hotels, doctor's offices, retail stores, and things like that, restaurants, schools. They have to have accommodations for people with disabilities as well. They have to have reasonable accommodations or adaptations, ramps, maybe special meeting times, and try to take every necessary step to remove barriers that prohibit a person with a disability to enter a doctor's office or something. Some of our consumers have home visits for doctors who really live and work in old buildings that have elevators that aren't accessible. So telecommunications, that's a really important one, especially for low vision, blind, or hard of hearing individuals. So sometimes a telephone doesn't work for a hard of hearing person or a deaf person, and conversely, if subtitles don't work for a blind or low vision person. So they have to make sure that when they put out emergency awareness signals like PBS, public service announcements, they have to make sure that it reaches every type of person with a disability.
Okay.
To make sure that everybody's safe, to make sure that everybody gets the same information and is updated with what's going on. So, and then there's miscellaneous, all the
Okay.
little things that don't fall under those top
I
four.
got you.
So that's a wide variety of provisions that the ADA as a whole, including relationships to other states. So if you cross state lines, it has to be, you're not just safe in Pennsylvania, you're safe in all 50 states. And then there's immunity and impact of insurance providers and benefits. So insurance providers and benefits at this time still have to offer the same kind of care for all people that need it.
Absolutely, absolutely.
There's prohibits against retaliation, hate crimes against people with disabilities, and using illegal drugs or attorney fees. So it has to be, a lawyer can't charge more because the person has a disability. So, it has to be fair for all persons.
So those 5 titles actually come under the ADA, under the Americans Disabilities
right.
Act. There's a quote I always hear. It says, "We've come a long way, baby, but we still have a long way to go."
We
So
do.
let me ask you the question.
Yeah.
What barriers are still existing for people with disabilities today? What barriers?
I see in the last 10, 15 years it's gotten better, but you're
Yes.
absolutely right. We still have a long way to go. And we, with disabilities, see it every single day. So I think it's the attitude is a big thing. Stereotypes, stigma, people with abilities, especially employers, make decisions for people with disabilities and go, oh, they're not going to be a good fit. They're not going to be able to handle this. Most people with disabilities are extremely strong people. They're strong-willed and they work harder. Maybe a little slower, but they work harder because they know that they have a little bit more to prove sometimes with their job.
Okay.
But TV shows like Speechless that's out there right now is that's a great show. There's actually a new one coming on Netflix this fall called Atypical, about a typical teenager, a not so typical teenager on the autism spectrum, and it looks really funny. I posted something on our Facebook page.
Okay.
We see more people with disabilities of all kinds in TV commercials, print ads, young kids in the Sears commercial or JCPenney in a wheelchair, showing the clothes off. And highway billboard advertisements are another big thing that I see for like rehabs, people using the exoskeletons or getting up out of their walkers and being rehabbed back into a more comfortable transition for themselves. So communication is kind of tricky. Again, we talked about that. If it's a written message, people with low vision or no vision can't necessarily read it if there's not an audio signal for them. And then alternatively, an auditory message isn't good for people that are low hearing or deaf. So we need to make sure that, society needs to make sure that it's covered for all people. But if they're not used to it, they don't think about it. And if they don't think about it, they're missing it's a whole other language. American Sign Language is a whole other language. And, society really needs to get up to speed with, understanding all languages and all people with disabilities. So physical, steps, curbs, uneven curbs. I know the city's doing a great job with the curb ramps, the curb cuts that we've been working on in our CAG group at Abilities in Motion. And just those little things make a big difference. And it's not just for people in wheelchairs and walkers. It's also for mommies with little strollers and things like that and carrying kids. So sometimes it's weight scales for people that are wheelchair bound, and they go to the doctor's office and they can't stand for any period of time and they can't get on the regular doctor scale. So it's little things that make a big difference.
Big difference.
Right.
Big
So,
difference.
policies, lack of awareness, especially with our current policies sometimes. People with disabilities aren't